This is the part most men never understand. In the early stage, there is uncertainty, curiosity, and space. She does not fully know you, you do not fully know her. This gap creates tension, and tension fuels desire. The mistake happens when a man tries to eliminate this tension too quickly. He believes closeness means safety, consistency means security, and availability means commitment. But psychologically, desire is not sustained by certainty, it is sustained by polarity. Women do not lose interest because a man is kind, honest, or attentive. They lose interest when a man collapses his emotional center into her. When your mood starts depending on her replies, her validation, her presence, something fundamental shifts. You may not say it out loud, but your behavior begins to communicate, "You are now the source of my emotional stability." And the moment that happens, attraction starts to die quietly. Stoic psychology explains this clearly. The Stoics believed suffering begins when you attach your inner peace to things outside your control. Another person's feelings are always outside your control. When a man gives emotional authority to a woman, when her interest determines his confidence, he abandons self-mastery. Attraction cannot survive where self-mastery is absent. At the beginning, she is drawn to your independence, your calm, your sense of direction, your grounded presence. But once she gets you, if she senses that your life now revolves around her, the dynamic flips. She is no longer a world, you are orbiting hers. Emotional and imbalance. One of the most elements of fear is the certainty is not insecurity, it is space. It is the room for imagination. When a woman is not certain she fully has you, her mind stays engaged. When certainty arrives too fast, when you are always available, always agreeable, always emotionally inclined, and relaxed turns into boredom. Men who overtext and know they think that simply not overexposing yourself emotionally before trust and depth are earned. A Stoic man understands timing. He reveals himself gradually, not because he is hiding, but because depth is meant to unfold, not be dumped. Women also lose interest when a man stops leading emotionally. Leadership here does not mean control, it means emotional steadiness. It means you are not reactive to every shift in her mood. It means you can tolerate ambiguity without panic. Most men cannot. They seek reassurance the moment uncertainty appears. They ask questions that expose anxiety. They try to fix the dynamic instead of holding their ground. From a Stoic perspective, this is weakness of the inner citadel. When your inner state collapses under uncertainty, you signal fragility. Attraction requires emotional strength. Strength is not dominance. Strength is calmness under pressure. Another reason women lose interest after getting you is predictability without purpose. Predictability rooted in values is attractive. Predictability rooted in emotional dependence is not. When your routine becomes waiting for her, when your excitement peaks only when she gives attention, your life shrinks. She feels this contraction instinctively, and contraction repels. In the beginning, she saw you as a man moving forward. Now she sees a man pausing his life for her. That pause feels like weight. No one wants to be responsible for another person's emotional gravity. Even if she cannot explain it, she feels it. Stoicism teaches that you must never abandon your duty to yourself, your work, your discipline, your growth. When you sacrifice these for attention, you communicate scarcity. Scarcity is not attractive. Scarcity creates pressure. And pressure suffocates desire. Women also lose interest when a man confuses emotional openness with emotional leakage. Openness is grounded and intentional. Leakage is uncontrolled and reactive. When you share fears, insecurities, and attachment too early, you are not bonding, you are unburdening. That shifts the emotional role. She stops feeling desire and starts feeling responsibility. Desire cannot coexist with responsibility for your emotional state. Another key factor is outcome dependence. When you become invested in a specific outcome, commitment, exclusivity, validation, you stop being present. Your energy becomes future-focused and anxious. She feels this as tension. A Stoic man does not cling to outcomes. He focuses on character and action. He allows outcomes to unfold naturally. This non-attachment keeps attraction alive because it removes pressure. When a woman gets you and senses that you are no longer centered in yourself, she experiences a subtle loss of respect. Respect is not something demanded. It is something felt, and once respect weakens, attraction follows it out the door. This does not mean women want emotionally unavailable men. That is a myth. They want emotionally self-contained men. There is a massive difference. Self-contained means you can connect deeply without losing yourself. Emotionally unavailable means you avoid connection. The former is magnetic. The latter is empty. Stoic philosophy emphasizes balance. You engage fully without attachment. You care without clinging. You invest without surrendering your identity. When men fail to maintain this balance, women lose interest not out of cruelty, but out of instinct. Another reason attraction fades is overaccommodation. When you constantly adjust your behavior, opinions, and schedule to suit her, you erase your edges. Edges are what define you. Without them, you become emotionally flat. She may feel comfort, but desire needs contrast. It needs polarity. Polarity exists when two complete individuals meet. It disappears when one dissolves into the other. Women lose interest after getting you when you stop challenging them emotionally, not through conflict, but through presence. When you no longer have standards, when you no longer walk away from disrespect, when you tolerate inconsistency to keep access, these behaviors signal fear of loss. Fear is the opposite of attraction. Stoic men accept loss. Not because they don't care, but because they value integrity more than attachment. This acceptance creates emotional freedom. Freedom is intoxicating. When a woman senses you are not afraid to lose her, she feels drawn not because she wants to test you, but because she feels you are whole. Attraction is not maintained by effort. It is maintained by self-respect. The moment you trade self-respect for reassurance, attraction declines. Women do not consciously decide to lose interest. Their nervous system responds to signals. Signals of neediness, signals of emotional collapse, signals of loss of direction. And when those signals appear, desire fades naturally. The Stoic solution is simple but difficult. Keep your center. No matter how intense the connection feels, no matter how strong the chemistry is, you do not abandon yourself, you do not hand over your peace, you do not make another person the source of your emotional stability. When you maintain this discipline, attraction does not die after she gets you. It deepens, because she never fully gets you in a possessive sense. She experiences you as a grounded, evolving, self-directed man. And that is the version of you that women do not lose interest in, because that version never disappears. The second major reason women lose interest after initially being attracted is the subtle but critical loss of self-direction. At first, your purpose, discipline, and independence are major drivers of attraction. Women unconsciously respond to men who have lives that are full, structured, and self-directed. Purpose signals competence, confidence, and long-term reliability. When a man's focus, energy, or priorities shift from his mission to her validation or attention, his magnetic pull diminishes almost immediately. Women do not consciously notice every detail of your schedule or habits, but they feel the underlying energy that comes from a man whose life is guided by direction and discipline. Self-direction is not about being rigid or controlling. It is about creating an internal framework that is independent of external outcomes. Stoic psychology emphasizes that true power lies in governing yourself, not controlling others. When a man centers his identity on his values, ambitions, and purpose, he naturally generates attraction without trying. Conversely, when he centers his identity on the desire to maintain a woman's interest, he undermines the very foundation of attraction. The shift from internal to external dependence is almost invisible to men themselves, but it is felt instinctively by women as a subtle weakening of presence and authority. The mechanics of self-direction involve prioritization. When you initially meet a woman, your life likely has rhythm, your goals, your routines, your projects. These elements broadcast competence and reliability. Women sense a man who is moving forward, unafraid, and fully engaged in his own trajectory. This forward momentum produces attraction because it signals that he is capable of leadership, not in a domineering sense, but in the ability to maintain a course, overcome challenges, and remain internally coherent. When a man begins to adjust his schedule, energy, or priorities solely to accommodate a woman, the very traits that drew her initially begin to fade. Another subtle shift occurs in emotional bandwidth. Men who lose self-direction start to allocate disproportionate energy toward her moods, reactions, and availability. Emotional bandwidth that was previously invested in growth, skill acquisition, and personal mastery is now spent monitoring responses, strategizing conversations, or seeking reassurance. Stoic psychology frames this as misalignment between what is within your control and what is not. A man who devotes his energy to another person's emotional state surrenders his authority over himself. Women sense this surrender not intellectually but viscerally, and attraction diminishes because the man no longer represents self-possession and autonomy. Self-direction is also intertwined with independence. A man who is independent does not require validation to feel whole. His purpose gives him an internal anchor. Women are subconsciously attracted to this anchor because it signals that he is capable of leading his own life, and by extension, capable of contributing stability and strength to a partnership. The moment he begins to subordinate his goals to her attention or desire, he signals emotional dependence. Dependence, even if unintended, communicates scarcity. Scarcity reduces value in female perception because it creates pressure, neediness, and imbalance, emotional cues that are incompatible with sustained attraction. Decision-making patterns reveal self-direction as well. A man with clarity of purpose makes decisions aligned with his values. He knows when to say yes, when to say no, and when to prioritize long-term benefit over immediate gratification. This decisiveness is deeply attractive because it signals internal coherence. When he loses self-direction, decision-making becomes reactive and externally influenced. He overcompromises, seeks her approval, and makes choices that sacrifice his priorities. Women subconsciously register this as inconsistency, weakness, or a lack of authority over his own life. This subtle cue erodes attraction faster than most men realize. Time management and structured routines are silent indicators of self-direction. A man with a schedule, projects, and disciplined habits communicates competence without needing to advertise it. Women feel this competence as an invisible force. When the man becomes preoccupied with accommodating her schedules, desires, or whims at the expense of his own, the magnetic energy dissipates. Presence is lost because his mind is no longer fully anchored in his own trajectory. He becomes reactive to her cues rather than intentional in his own pursuits. The erosion of self-direction also manifests in conversation. Early attraction often features excitement, challenge, and intellectual curiosity. Men who maintain their path contribute ideas, vision, and subtle polarity. As self-direction diminishes, conversation becomes transactional or reactive. Instead of sharing thoughts from his own values and experiences, he begins to adjust language, opinions, or interests to align with hers excessively. This creates predictability and emotional flattening, which diminishes intrigue. Desire thrives on polarity, distinct identities engaging, not merging prematurely. A lack of self-direction is closely tied to overattachment. When a man invests emotionally in outcomes, he shifts from participation to expectation. His attention becomes conditional. He begins to anticipate her approval, monitor her interest, and strategize responses to maintain closeness. Women feel this subtly as pressure. Whereas initial attraction was drawn to a self-contained, forward-moving individual, this new behavior signals insecurity and imbalance. Emotional tension that fosters curiosity and desire is replaced by dependency-driven friction that repels subtly. Stoic psychology provides tools to preserve self-direction. The practice of differentiating between what is within your control and what is not is foundational. Her feelings, attention, and choices are outside your control. Your energy, focus, and actions are within it. Maintaining self-direction requires intentionally investing in what is yours to govern your time, priorities, growth, and emotional state. By keeping your internal center intact, attraction is preserved because your energy remains abundant, calm, and internally anchored. Purpose and vision are extensions of self-direction. A man with a clear life mission communicates value passively but powerfully. Women detect this as competence, autonomy, and leadership. When a man's mission becomes secondary to maintaining her attention, he reduces the energy that originally made him magnetic. Even if he continues to behave politely or generously, the lack of autonomous drive shifts the chemistry. Attraction is less about action and more about the energy of independence and progress that is communicated subtly but consistently. Boundaries are critical to maintaining self-direction. Early on, boundaries are perceived as strength. They communicate self-respect and intention. However, men who lose self-direction tend to compromise boundaries to avoid conflict, gain favor, or secure closeness. This over-accommodation signals a willingness to subordinate self-interest, which undermines polarity. Women sense the reduction in edge, and attraction wanes because the man no longer embodies completeness or autonomy. Polarity requires distinct, well-defined identity. Without it, desire diminishes naturally. Consistency of identity reinforces self-direction. Women respond to men whose behaviors are predictable yet independent, grounded in values rather than reactions. When a man loses self-direction, inconsistency creeps in. Moods fluctuate based on perceived approval, priorities shift toward pleasing her, and actions become reactive. This inconsistency communicates instability not consciously but energetically. Attraction relies on perceiving the man as reliable in his emotional and practical framework, and inconsistency erodes this perception. Emotional resilience is another marker of self-direction. A man who maintains perspective in the face of minor slights, delays, or ambiguities demonstrates self-containment. When self-direction erodes, he becomes reactive, anxious, and clingy. Women detect the reactive state subconsciously. Stability in emotional response signals competence and security. Instability signals neediness and scarcity. Attraction is drawn to the former and fades in the presence of the latter. Self-direction also enhances depth of character. Men with independent purpose cultivate skills, passions, and achievements that are intrinsically rewarding. This intrinsic fulfillment creates energy that is felt externally, producing attraction without effort. When focus shifts to external validation, fulfillment becomes contingent on another person, energy leaks, and the man loses the magnetic aura that initially drew attention. Female psychology responds not to effort, but to energy, alignment, and internal abundance. The maintenance of self-direction requires disciplined daily practices. Stoic reflection, journaling, deliberate focus on growth, and structured routines fortify autonomy. Men who cultivate these habits unconsciously broadcast reliability, competence, and independence. Women detect these traits at a nervous system level. When these practices are abandoned in favor of relational preoccupation, the subtle signals of attraction weaken, often before men realize it. Desire thrives on presence grounded in purpose, not on reactive availability. Even micro-behaviors matter. How a man spends his time, responds to opportunities, or pursues goals communicates more than words. A self-directed man moves forward regardless of her attention. A man who abandons purpose becomes noticeable in his reactivity. Women sense who is moving with intention versus who is moving in response. This energetic difference forms the core of attraction. Finally, women lose interest not because they want less connection, but because the emotional and energetic contrast that initially drew them disappears. Self-direction creates tension-free polarity. A man is available, engaged, and yet self-contained. Losing self-direction shifts the dynamic to dependence and predictability, and desire fades as a natural consequence. The third and final reason women lose interest after initially being attracted is the subtle but decisive collapse of internal completeness. The moment a man stops being emotionally and psychologically whole on his own. This is often the hardest truth for men to accept because it is invisible and occurs in small increments, yet its effect is profound. Women are instinctively drawn to men who are self-contained, self-directed, and emotionally autonomous. When that autonomy is surrendered, when a man begins to rely on her for validation, emotional stability, or self-worth, the very foundation of attraction erodes. It is not about superficial traits, gifts, or effort. It is about the internal architecture of the man himself. Internal completeness begins with self-mastery. Stoic philosophy teaches that your peace, your focus, and your contentment must be cultivated within, independent of external circumstances. Women feel when a man's emotional state is contingent upon their actions, approval, or attention. When a man becomes reactive to her moods, delays, or signals, he signals scarcity without realizing it. Scarcity generates pressure, and pressure destroys desire. Attraction is maintained not by proximity, attention, or effort, but by the sense that the man is whole, stable, and sufficient unto himself. One of the most common manifestations of lost completeness is overinvestment in outcomes. Men begin with confidence, presence, and direction, but once initial attachment forms, they start to anticipate, calculate, and strategize to maintain her interest. If she does this, I will do that. If she replies slowly, I need to chase more. If she seems distant, I need to fix it. These patterns are invisible to the conscious mind, but are immediately detectable in energy, tone, and subtle behavior. Women do not consciously analyze these signals, they feel them. And when a man's energy becomes contingent on her actions, attraction diminishes because he is no longer whole. The collapse of internal completeness is also evident in overcommunication. Men start with measured attention, thoughtful responses, and selective engagement. As dependency grows, this balance shifts. Messages flood, calls become constant, explanations proliferate. Each act of overengagement communicates anxiety, neediness, and loss of inner authority. Stoics call this surrendering control over what is outside your power. A man who loses his completeness becomes the pursuer, and she unconsciously steps back. Polarity is lost because the energetic tension that fuels desire has dissipated. Emotional reactivity is another symptom. Initially, a man may tolerate ambiguity, uncertainty, and minor emotional fluctuations without panic. As internal completeness erodes, his patience thins. He reacts to delayed attention, perceived neglect, or ambiguous behavior with anxiety, over-explaining, or overcompensation. Women feel this like a subtle vibration of desperation. In early attraction, curiosity and pursuit were guided by polarity and contrast. Now they are replaced by a reactive dynamic that signals dependence. Desire cannot flourish in the presence of dependence. Boundaries also reflect completeness. A self-contained man maintains them consistently,